The Home Secretary is going back to the Commons today to further outline what are very controversial plans to reduce migration. She's described paying failed asylum seekers to voluntarily leave the UK, reportedly up to at least £3,000 a head. And she says that's value for money for taxpayers. She's also signalled that she would be willing to consider an even bigger increase in those payments.
Well, Minister for Children Josh MacAlister joins us now, and I know you want to discuss breakfast clubs. We will get to that, I promise. But first, do you agree with the Home Secretary that paying failed migrant seekers to return home is value for our tax buck?
Well, the thing I'd encourage people to do is wait for the statement from the Home Secretary this afternoon. I've obviously not seen it, so the Home Secretary will be setting out the details of these proposals later today. But this comes on the back of the biggest announced change to our asylum system in a generation earlier on this week, and the real clarity from the government that this is a moral problem to sort out, that we have people coming here to the UK illegally, and not being able to remove people who don't have a right to be here. The public clearly not being tolerant anymore of a system that is clearly so broken, and wanting to make sure that we can have safe and legal routes for people. But to do that, we need to build public consent. And of course, as the Children's Minister...
As a member of the public, as well as Minister for Children, do you agree with that principle? Because I think it's the principle, the idea of paying failed migrants to return home, which will have an emotional reaction to our viewers this morning. They'll either see the sense and the logic in what she said, or they will just think, no. Where does your gut lie?
Well, my gut lies in looking at the situation we have at the moment, where the Home Secretary outlined earlier on this week, we've got 700 Albanian families in the UK. They can return to Albania. It's a perfectly safe country. They've established some family connections here, and it's proving really difficult to remove people. And the cost of that to the UK taxpayer is enormous, because we're having to pay for hotels and all of the process costs. We can't keep doing that. So I think the public expect us to do everything that we can, using all the tools available and getting to the best outcome as soon as possible. And the Home Secretary will set out more details about that later, but that is essentially about finding the best ways to get people back to the countries that they've come from if they're safe, and making sure that people come here through safe and legal routes that we control with caps, rather than the system we've got at the moment that we inherited, which is people travelling over the channel on small boats.
What are we going to do about this Russian ship that's sniffing around our communications, our cyber communications, and fundamentally threatening them? This is Putin prodding us with a great big electric cattle prod, isn't it? Is our response robust enough?
This is part of the Russian playbook, which is to provoke and test. We have been tracking this vessel since it's been near and in British waters, as have NATO allies. A UK submarine submerged came above water recently to make it very clear that we know exactly what this vessel is doing. And the Defence Secretary said yesterday really clearly that we are watching this, we are tracking it, and that Russia should be well aware that we are on the case with this. We're not saying any more at the moment, because we don't want the Russian government to be aware of our options and our plans, but we won't tolerate Russian vessels being in our waters.
Well, we certainly are tracking them, but they're tracking us, tracking them. And we heard yesterday that the crew on board the Russian ship has been, and this is incredibly dangerous, shining lasers into the eyes of our pilots who are circling the ship.
Yeah, look, all of this underscores how important it is for the UK to have the defence capabilities, which we're building up right now, to respond to these sorts of threats and deter them in the first place, which is why we're making big decisions on investing in our armed forces. It's why yesterday the government announced the first wave of a new set of munitions factories across the UK, which is really important to ensure that we've got the ammunition we need, but also bolstering our industrial capability as a country so that we're resilient. So we are taking these things extremely seriously. The Defence Secretary and the Foreign Secretary are monitoring this very, very closely. And it won't be a surprise to any of your listeners that Russia is a threat to the UK, and we're treating it as such.
Indeed. And what does not tolerate mean? It wouldn't be your decision personally, of course. It's not your brief. But as a government, when you see us taking, going back at Russia, what people, I think, have to understand that. Because, of course, without knowing what the response would be, it can seem quite empty to say we're not tolerating this.
Yeah, you'll understand why I'm not going to go there on live TV about options that the UK government has got. But the Defence Secretary was really clear about this yesterday. John Healey is completely over the situation, and the UK knows what Russia is trying to do with these attempts. And it's not just the UK that Russia is entering the waters of in the UK. It's also all of our NATO allies as well. So this is an issue for Europe and for the NATO alliance. All
right, well, fair's fair. You're here to talk about the government's plans to roll out breakfast clubs in schools. Explain to us how that's going to work and how big a rollout it is.
Yeah, so this is a big part of the government's plan to improve affordability for families, to make sure that we help tackle the cost of living. We've already rolled out a number of free breakfast clubs across primary schools in England, and today we're announcing the next wave of that. So another 500 schools will be able to start coming forward from today, and then there'll be another 1,500 at the start of next year, taking the total number to well over 2,000 schools by September next year. And this helps families because it means parents can drop their children off earlier at school, so it helps with some of the morning rush. It's really good for children's attendance, so it means more children get into school and are ready to learn. And it's also really good for attainment. Children who go to breakfast clubs typically do better in their education. So this is a really practical step that we're taking. We've also learned from some of the early rollout pilots, and we're putting additional funding into it as well, so that this is funded to work for families and for schools.
You're providing £1 per child, as I understand it. What sort of breakfast are you expecting schools can provide for that? And, of course, there's those that would argue for those most in need, scrapping the two-child benefit would be an effective way of tackling this problem.
The package for schools isn't just the £1 per pupil. It's got further funding attached to it for staffing, for heating bills, for all those sorts of things. But we do know that we can get nourishing breakfasts for children with the amount of money that we're putting into this programme. You know, the average cost of a loaf of bread, the average cost of a pint of milk, the cost of a banana, you add all those things up and actually children can have the choice of fruit, they can have porridge, they can have cereal. And we're working with supermarkets, Morrison's, and with companies like Weetabix to also make sure that schools can get the best value out of the spending they've got on breakfast clubs. So this is making a really practical difference. And you're right to highlight the link to child poverty. This helps alleviate child poverty, as does the government's decision recently to massively extend eligibility for free school meals from September next year. That single measure alone will lift 100,000 children out of poverty.
Well, good luck with both of those, and thank you very much for your time this morning.